Good morning. Yesterday, I started talking about a case that occurred in Paeroa in New Zealand, in the North Island of New Zealand, and was juxtaposing it a little bit against Delphi murders. The case is the murder of Jordon Voudouris, or Voudouris. I can't remember if his S is silent. So I thought it's interesting, maybe introduce people to a case where they can look it up, look at all the information that's out there, and just see the points where, okay, if this were Delphi, this is how people would be talking about it. This is the videos that they would be making. This is the information, fact or fiction, that they'd be running with and making up stories about, and swaying people's ideas about, rightly or wrongly. So yeah, that's why I'm talking about it. Jordon's case, it's an unsolved case. It's been on the New Zealand version of the show, Cold Case. But, I don't know if it's entirely cold, because there seems to be a few things that police surely can keep following up, that someone still might come forward with. One thing being that there was a vehicle seen, it was captured on CCTV in the main drag of Paeroa at the time that is just before Jordon Voudouris would have been murdered. And then there are other leads that they could pursue with regards to a violent crime that occurred in the hours following Jordon's murder, and also these crimes that happened to Jordon, which is to say people were robbing him. So there were gas station holdups, etc. the morning following Jordon's murder, and previously to being murdered, Jordon had food from his restaurant stolen. Okay, and there's various allegations about that. So, Delphi murders. This is the double homicide of Abby Williams, Libby German, February 13th, 2017, in Delphi, Indiana. And, we've got this, we've got the situation where there's these sources that come out and speak and give information, and people make videos based on these sources, and people think that, well, maybe because these people are vaguely related to family, etc. in Delphi, related to these girls, oh, well, it's got to be real evidence, and not just their opinion or gossip or their misunderstandings, their disinformation or misinformation. It's taken as gospel. And if more than one creator is repeating the source's misinformation, it seems to be given extra cred. And so what is useful about the murder case of Jordon, who was a 55-year-old man, he owned a pizza shop in a little town called Paeroa. He was murdered on the early Monday morning, 18th of June, 2012. He was shot with a rifle. He had defensive wounds on his arms. This is just in an alleyway behind a main drag. Now, sure, in a very sleepy little town on a Sunday night, Monday night, the time when there's going to be the least people around in these small towns, other than maybe truck drivers, though, coming through from mills, from the abattoirs, from the ports, going up to Auckland. So, these unsolved mysteries. In Jordon's case, there's so much gossip and innuendo and so-called sources who you could assume, one might assume stupidly, that, they know what they're talking about. They were his workers. They were Jordon's workers in the pizza shop, or they were his neighbours, direct neighbours for 7 years on the main drag of this little town, Paeroa. So it's interesting how when you can look in at a case like Jordon's with some perspective, with some sort of distance nearly, if you will, is it possible that people could find it in themselves, find the interest to apply some sort of perspective and analytical thought to what they're hearing about Delphi? So this is not going to be organized. What I've got is I've got my notes here that I've scrawled as I've listened to the podcast. But I thought, well, maybe, okay, we could pick one of the persons close to the case and just talk about what gossip has gone on about them and so on and so on. And let's just see if, you can see these parallels to Delphi and see that, oh, hold on a minute, that person was directly involved. They, as far as they were right there, and yet how wrong they were. And here we are, we don't have anybody right there in the case of Abby and Libby, but people seem to know a heck of a lot, don't they? Know a heck of a lot, quote unquote. Excuse me, have some coffee. Like my mug. This is my polite one. So a good person maybe to start with is this character of Gareth. And who talks about Gareth first? Well, it's two women, but it's mainly a person called Rusty. And, it could be said that Rusty has several reasons of her own to find anywhere to direct some sort of blame or interest, right? She's got a lot of reasons herself to misdirect people, or just to maybe put something out there and hope that it's a diversion and that people run with it and that they don't look at her too closely. Okay, but again, there's a lot of reasons why you might be suspicious of Linda, or Rusty. I'm going to call her Rusty. That's her nickname. But you need to look again and again. It's layer, layer, layer. You need to just, peel back the layers, because she's then got her own motives that could be nothing to do with Jordon's murder, of wanting to redirect, right? And it's often, we so often don't have the full picture, but we come to certain conclusions, but we need to remember, I think it's all right to speculate and everything, of course I do, I do it, but I think we need to not lock it in and not hold on to something tightly and be immovable about it. We need to have some flex. We need to realize that this is just a little piece that we just need to consider but not rely on, because when people are relying on things and refusing to bother running through like a devil's advocate in their own mind, if they refuse to run all the scenarios through the head and try them all out just to see what else might be actually the case. They're doing damage and a disservice. They're doing their own mind a disservice, but they're doing the girls a disservice in Delphi, that's for sure. So Rusty, quite central. She's Jordon's neighbour. There's Vivian on the corner with Arkwright's Antiques, and there was Jordon's shop, Mykonos, where he supplied pizza and passed it to townsfolk, visitors, truckies, etc. And then there was Rusty's shop, and it's called Rusty's 2211. The numerals. And Rusty was at home that Sunday night. As we've discussed, Jordon had shut down his shop at 10:30. He had been on his computer, possibly cruising through TradeMe, an online buy-sell site in New Zealand. And it's like the Trading Post, etc., maybe like a Craigslist type thing, where you buy and sell all sorts of items. And he switched his computer off at 1:30. Rusty had had a visitor that day. Her friend, Barry, had come into town, and probably a lot of people didn't know something about Barry, and Rusty had a lot of reason to keep him secret. She had met Barry later in life, I think Rusty was probably in her 50s, and so they didn't grow up knowing each other as the first cousins that they are, and they had a sexual attraction. And Barry had come into town to take Linda around in his V8 car, in his muscle car, that hung out all night. She told the podcaster Ryan Wolf that, nothing happened, but, she's got a lot of reason to lie. She just separated from her husband, who's now dead. His name's Dick. And anywho, so she was there. Barry had stayed over. Barry left at 4:30 and saw Jordon, and the police weren't called until 6 a.m. after Rusty had called her ex-husband Dick. Rusty talks about just, at the time, she'd gone out the front of her shop onto the main drag, Belmont Road, which is the highway. She'd gone out the front. Her friend, Barry, her cousin, who stayed overnight, she went out the front to wave him goodbye, and he'd stopped his car and came and said, "There's a body." She had looked out the back, all these little legs. One point she says, she thought it might be some Māori fella who's just laying down drunk. Another time, later she says, it looked like a little child. Another time she's told Vivian of Arkwright's has said, Rusty just said she saw a couple of legs. But she states that she stayed in the flat at the back of the shop. And, when her cousin told her at 4:30 that, someone was out there, she was in shock and numb. She didn't know what to do. She's saying that she woke early to consider taking washing up to her ex-husband. So she used to live in the Karanga Happy Gorge, which is on the way out to the coast from Pairoa, halfway between, it separates Pairoa and Waihi. And so she probably didn't have any facilities really where she was, and she needed to go back home to her old house that she shared with Dick. In reality, of course, she's gotten up early. This friend's going off to work at the meatworks. And actually it was the kopu timber mill, I think. So she says she sort of stayed up to, well, you know, she was going to stay up just to do some washing. She's then been told the body's there. Now, Rusty says Barry came and said, there's a body at the gate. The gate is in Hall Street, as we discussed last time, around the corner, the back alley to the back of the shops. There's a body at the gate. A drunk Maori? Nah. She swears black and blue. She didn't want to go and have a look, but, you know, she's described to Vivian seeing these little legs, and she's described him looking as a little child. They had seen, Barry and Rusty had seen Jordon that afternoon. He was sorting rubbish out behind his gate. So he had another gate at the back of his shop and some freezers there, the freezers that used to get robbed. Apparently he was out there sorting rubbish. Maybe that's why there was allegedly a hammer, knife, etc., these tools, which can be weapons, out at the back of his shop, right? Yeah. And I did think, oh, is it strange that, okay, she got up at 4:30. Is it strange that she was planning to go out there super early to Dick's to do washing? Dick was still working at a place called Quinn's and Morning Yeoman, and so I guess maybe he would have been getting ready to go to work, but did it matter if he was there or not? I'm imagining Rusty still had a key. But, you know, Rusty really didn't want Dick to know about Barry. They'd only just separated, and, you know, I can imagine, I just imagine this whole veil of selfishness running through Rusty's mind, because, you know, I think she was really in a quandary. Oh, you know, kind of a little bit pissed off, feeling bad about it, but feeling a bit pissed off that how dare Jordon go and get whacked? Why now? Why does something have to be happening now? Because Dick's going to find out about Barry, and, you know, we've just separated. I don't want him thinking that I'm sleeping with another man already, or maybe thinking that maybe that's why we broke up, or, you know, but we don't know the real story. We don't know if Barry was anything to do with the breakup, if Dick kicked out Rusty, if Rusty decided to leave Dick. As I've discussed already, I'll try not to say that little phrase too much because, you know, but there's a prior video, of course, with a bit of groundwork. You know, Rusty did nurse Dick in his ill health to his death in the last month of his life, last months in 2020. So she describes the scene as, you know, Jordon's doors were all open and his lights were all on when she went to call out for him, and she went back inside and she called Dick. So I have a feeling she did look around the corner and see those little legs. After she called Dick, the ambulance arrived at 5 or 10 minutes later. I'm not sure where the service was, because there's actually an ambulance. We've got Belmont Street, we've got Hall Street, the rows of shops here, and there's actually an ambo across the Pacific Highway here. So I'm guessing that it's a volunteer service, and just like maybe with Flora, Fire, hi Grimezilla, and hi again Yeoman, you know, a volunteer fire service. So it's probably the same there in Pairua. This is such a small town. I can't see that ambos are sleeping, ready to go into action in this sleepy town. It's probably maybe volunteer. So someone's had to get the call through 000, get it, you know, call patch through. They've had to wake up. Hi, Karen. and get to the station and take the ambulance just literally across the street. From my recollection, and this literally is, since the mid-90s, from my recollection, well, actually, after that, no, I did go. I went in early 2000s, I drove through, but I think, the ambulance service, it's just always been where it was. It was just across the street. So considering it took, she says, 5-10 minutes, who knows, but the ambulance, it wasn't like instant. She says she was in trauma, in shock. There was a TV crew there and she didn't want to talk. She didn't really feel very safe. She only had an old Pomeranian dog with her. She'd left her dogs down in Karangahape Gorge at home she had shared with Dick. And a few people like to mention their dogs and the situation with their dogs in this story. But yeah, so she had a little pom with her. She's definitely a woman with feelings. She shows a lot of grief talking about Dick's death and also talking about the death of her little dogs and, that she'd suffered just before and sort of in the years after. But, you have to wonder, okay, why did she wait? Did she just not want to be a direct witness for some reason? Is it all just because she just couldn't push herself past the shame and the feelings of guilt to do with having Barry, her cousin, staying overnight with her? It's, everyone is different, but you just think, come on. This is that bystander problem, isn't it? How in New York City, they talk about people will just walk right over you, right? You could lie down and have a heart attack and people will walk right over you. Was there more to what Barry said? Did Barry say to her, look, he's totally dead. Can you let me get away? I don't know. So maybe she's wanting to remove herself, though, just out of fear of thinking if she's the one to report it, if she finds them right now, are they still around? Are the perpetrators still around, etc.? And, will she be in danger later? Will they come after her to silence her, So Dick does find out about the cousin, of course, and Dick, in no uncertain terms, tells Rusty, what a coward Barry is, and how could he live in a vulnerable situation? And of course, Rusty is reiterating over and again, that she hadn't known him as a cousin. So she's meaning, look, I didn't know him growing up. I didn't know he was my cousin when I met him. They probably met as adults, maybe a few years into her marriage with Dick. We don't know. But it seems very vague about what the police were told, whether Barry lied to the police, whether Rusty's lied about what Barry saw or didn't see, right? But Rusty, of course, she says, I never lie. I never lie. So she's an old-fashioned woman, and she never lies. So we're just to believe that. Then, it is a bit interesting that, okay, well, look, probably Barry doesn't have anything to do with it. He sounds a bit rough, actually. Ryan Wolf, the podcaster, did call him. He got hung up on. He was told to fuck off. But, there was this SUV cruising that main drag at 109 and 121. Perfect timing. And it's something that the police withheld. So that makes you think, doesn't it, that they were super interested in this vehicle. So it kind of shoves aside Barry, really. But, what we're learning about Rusty is that she does actually have crooked lines, right? Blurred lines about things. So when you hear this Frank and what would you call it, guys? When you hear that sort of blanket statement, or that very, you know, black and white statement that I never lie. No, Rusty is 100% always blurring these lines, isn't she? She's doing it with Barry. So she's always she's proving herself to be as human as the next person, I guess. Maybe just self-delusional, maybe trying to delude others just, you know, for very good reason, because people judge. But we're about to learn, I will get to it, sorry. We will learn that, you know, she does judge. Mussolini, that's a funny name, Mussolini. Yeah. Who was that? Benito Mussolini? Is that the Turkish guy that caused havoc in Greece? Maybe you're a Canadian Italian. Don't know. Welcome. So, you know, you can sort of see on one hand why you can keep quiet to the cops, but I think it's one thing to keep quiet. Just say her shop, Rusty's 2211, her antique shop, her knick-knack shop, she dealt in, she says, oh, they were ornamental arms. She swears none of them were stolen. But the gas stations later in Waihi and Cadicat were held up by pistols that looked like, you know, 22s. And she was someone that bought and sold goods, and she bought and sold these ornamental pistols, right? And I'm trying to remember, I guess it'll be in here somewhere about whether they were stolen or not. I have a feeling, you know, you want to know, what did I write? Linda used to sell imitation guns, and the robbers apparently had an imitation pistol. You just want to know, what sort of records did Rusty keep in her shop, right? And did the cops manage to align her purchases with sales, and was every gun accounted for? Because, you know, Barry's there, he's taken off at 4:30. At 5, there's a hold up in Waihi, and it's a drive through Karankahape Gorge. And he hasn't wanted to, you know, he's wanted to just scarper without being there to call the cops. What's he gone off to do? Okay, has he gone to the, you know, the Kahu mill, timber mill? Well, hopefully, of course, that's been... Sorry, the last few times I get on to talk here, I've got a frog in my throat. Hopefully that has been covered properly by the police, right? This is the level of trust that citizens have to have in investigations in police, is, did they do this right? Because sickeningly, too many times, cases are solved, you know, 10 years, a dozen years later, 20 years later, and it's found that they knocked on some doors or went to a business, they didn't get the answer, and no one went back. It was not followed up. And then it might be cold case detectives realizing, you know, or whatever, this was never followed up, or something happens, someone comes forward, or they're caught for another crime, you know. So, you know, citizens, it's so scary how much faith citizens always have to show in the people in so-called, you know, in law enforcement authority, right? And how the leaders lead their teams, and how those teams carry out their roles, and in how conscientious individuals are. And, you know, because we know not everybody is good at their job, right? There are people that are crap at being a secretary, they're crap at being a GP, they're crap at being a lawyer or an accountant. But they're probably, that's often still in these jobs, right? So, you know, I just thought, well, that's interesting about the fake armory. How many of these other antique shops are dealing in all these fake weapons? You know, and the timing of Barry, it's perfect timing to drive through Happy Gorge and meet up with these people to go and commit these crimes. Then, again, though, Barry is older. He's older, and these crimes were ostensibly committed by some young hooligans. Are they the type of young hooligan that was robbing Jordon's freezers because he was buying fish off young people, undersized fish? So so that was, look, a little bit about Rusty, and then I wanted to say what she was saying about what people were saying about other people, and I just want to find, because, okay, so now this is what I think might be the same person talked about by two people. So, and this is the person I want to talk about. It's a person called Gareth. So Linda, when she's talking about someone, she's trying to talk about, I think she's the one that was talking about Jordon had, sorry, just bear with me. You might want to come back and watch this on replay so you can skip, or you can play things on the double, which is how I watch everything. If lives are too slow, I'll go away and come back and play it on the double. I just want to get it right. Which woman calls Gareth the blonde French guy? I'm pretty sure Rusty, who I'm talking about now, Rusty was casting these aspersions. Oh, Jordon, there was this guy that he had working for him, and I think they lived together in the flat, and they would drink and they would get in arguments, and I think he was there. He'd been fired, and then he'd come back that night. Yep, this blonde guy, blonde French guy. And she mentions how she'd asked Jordon one time, hey, are you gay or are you straight? And she's really kind of, pushing something onto this other person, right? This staff member. And she's not the only woman that is saying about this person that he was someone that was sacked, it was a volatile relationship, that this guy had drug connections. Okay, so Vivian tells about this Gareth guy. She gossips unendingly as well. And so how many people are out there convinced that Jordon had hired some guy he'd brought down from Auckland to get him out of a bad situation, and he argued. It was very volatile. This guy had triad connections, which is a Chinese gang, very, very dangerous gang. And so alleging that, he, by association, that somehow Jordon might be involved with triads, drugs, be gay, all of these things, because somehow this guy might have been this blonde French guy. And it's sort of, and the couples, the guys that share a flat and they argue and they drink a lot together, and usually they're a gay couple, they're a dysfunctional, weird gay couple, right? It's just part of society. So all these aspersions, right? And Tatiana, who works at the shop, is another one that, and she was very young though. She's like 16, 15, 14, 13, working for Jordon for a few years in the pizza shop. And she, she talks about how, Gareth, he was, it was volatile. They were fighting that night. Gareth was sacked that night. This just sounds like first person testimony, and it sounds like, from both neighbors, talking about a person like this. Doesn't it just sound like something that, yeah, if this were Delphi, these are sources, direct sources, directly connected. It's absolute truth. It's absolute fact. We need to look into this now. We need to look into drug connection, triads from Auckland. This would be fodder for miles. She started to work for Jordon when she was 13. I think she was 16 when he was killed. Yep. So she's about 27 now. She's a young woman now, and probably with a lot of hindsight, insight. When you're young and this is your one job, and I mean the hospitality industry, geez, without it even being in Paeroa, right? Can you imagine? Chefs. The kitchens are fiery places. I've worked in them, and he has a son that he named Jordon. Oh wow, yeah. I guess. Well, now, yes. Now that, yeah. So now I'll tell you about Gareth, right? So, who is actually Gareth? Well, Ryan Wolf, the podcaster. I'll just call him Ryan from now on. He did track this person down, and this person was, hey Mark, MK Ultra I like to call Mark. He was in Paeroa. He was working for Jordon at the time. He'd come down from Auckland. He was actually living in a house, I didn't know the name, but a few streets away with a person called Paul. And, okay, so Paul passed out drunk, maybe midnight, maybe, so yeah, sure. Gareth could have left that little house that they were in and gone and murdered Jordon, and then gone back to the house and then woken up in complete fright and alarm when he's woken and told what's happened to Jordon. Gareth races in to Jordon's business. The cops are there, everything's happening, and he's completely beside himself. He's devastated. And why? Look, he's not just some young whippersnapper randomly picked up from Auckland prior to Jordon's death. So, he'd met Jordon 10 years prior. I think he'd been working in some restaurants that he'd been working for Jordon maybe, used to socialize with Nico and Christos, who are Jordon's brothers. They're all in the restaurant business, running various establishments in places like Devonport in North Auckland, or in Orewa, where I think they've still got a pizza shop now. And he had known Jordon for a long time. They had a professional relationship as well as a friendship, and knew each other and their children, the families. And he was out of work at the time and looking for work. And so, yeah, so overall 20 years ago they met. So he was offered a job by Jordon. Come down and work for me, because I want to expand Mykonos into more of a, I want to have a restaurant side as well as, this fast food side. Hi, Broken Justice for True Crime. Hi, Johnny Kramer. Fast food restaurant. He wants to expand it, right? So Gareth is actually a chef, a cook. I don't know what qualifications he has, but he's experienced in hospitality. You really need to know your thing. You need to know all about the food industry. It's very specific on where and how to buy food and how to store it and how to do your menus and how to work it all out, and then how to prep it and cook it and serve it and everything. Okay, so he's professional and he's come in to help Jordon, it's a simpatico, the symbiotic relationship. Jordon's helping him out and Gareth's helping Jordon out. Gareth does talk about his wonky past, and I don't know how it sort of got into the realm of the gossip and the ether of Paeroa, so that it could then become that Gareth has triad connections, and is possibly trying to hide from the triads, or that maybe even he and Jordon are involved with the triads dealing drugs. But he tells Ryan that he tells them that, well, when I was younger, I did some time in juvie, in juvenile detention, because I was running around with a really bad crowd I'd met at school or through school or in my neighborhood, whatever he says. I do have the notes. I'm just ad-libbing though now. It's just easier. He talks about how actually I will get his notes out, because he says a lot of really interesting stuff, and you realize that people are just dipshits with the way that they talk about things without knowing, because that is some really serious shit to talk. It's serious smack to say that people are dealing ice, P, as they say in New Zealand, or ice, or shabu, crystal meth, okay? So, Gareth, he says, it's bullshit. I was not fired that night. Whoever said that is full of shit. Gareth is convinced one of them knows who did it. But sorry, I'll just finish that thing about his history. He had gotten in with some real sociopaths who were Asian. And he spent a few years with that. He got into a lot of trouble as a teenager. And sometimes that's a sign of a sociopath, right? But he did some time in juvie. It was so god awful that he tried to just write his life, and I'm sure he's a bit of a tough guy. He's got history, but, he is giving his own testimony, and that he would have talked to police about, and police would have checked this, that, no, I'm not involved with triads. I'm not dealing drugs. I have a rough past like anyone, but Jordon, I'm not just some rando that Jordon decided to bring down and now have infected his life and brought about his murder. I'm Jordon's friend. I'm deeply grieving. This person meant the world to me. His family meant the world to me. His children mean the world to me, right? But you've got these weird-ass women down in Paeroa. They don't know. They're not talking to Gareth. They're assuming his race. For some reason, he's French to one of them. They're assuming his situation. They're assuming his affiliations. They're assuming his moral fiber and his values. And what's worse is they're yapping about it. They're yapping about it for a decade, and to anyone. And particularly to journalists, for example. If you're going to talk to a journalist about it, well, this is information that you are passing on to put out. Keep your trap shut. No, they're quite convinced. And so can you imagine the hundreds of people, and then how that spreads, one tells two, tells four, tells eight. It's the pyramid scheme of gossip, right? Spreads like wildfire, and you can't rein it in. You can never take back these initial things. There are always people that are only going to find the lies or the misinformation or the disinformation, who might run with it and spread it. The repeaters that I talk about here on Humanimal channel. You can't take it back. People must be very clear when they're speculating and why. So, yeah, Gareth he says something is not right. It's very personal. He says this is a personal crime. He thinks it is a personal crime, as in, a targeted crime, right? He says someone knows. He's asked, about the allegations that Jordon enjoyed gambling. A lot of people, including Ryan, just seem to think, well, his gambling was controlled, amounts, etc., right? And that he didn't have debts. But, Gareth, he does say, look, yeah, possibly there were gambling debts that no one really knew about, that Jordon kept stum about, and that he might have borrowed from the wrong people. And, oh, yeah, because it's around the world in 80 seconds, isn't it, Yeoman? So, that is a possible motive, right? But, Ryan couldn't uncover it. Doesn't mean that he didn't do it, but Ryan couldn't uncover problem gambling. There was rumors that, maybe Jordon had won a lot of money. And it goes from, first it was $200 left in his pocket, which is probably right, to $1,000 to $400 to a huge win, etc. But as I've discussed, he had his wristwatch on him. He had money in his wallet, and nothing was taken. He was just murdered. So then Gareth. So I'll just explain that Gareth is now back in Auckland, okay? And if you're running from the triads, you're not going back to that city. And yeah, that is the stronghold of triads in New Zealand, is Auckland. Rogerson. So he's involved. Sorry, just forget that I said that name, because I might talk about other cases later. He tears up. Gareth is just tearing up. He's very emotional. He's trying to hold it together as he's talking to Ryan, when he's thinking about Jordon's injuries, that he had the injuries to his arms that had to be covered because, when there was a viewing, they didn't want, Jordon's children to be seeing these injuries. Christos. So it's a brother, and Heather's probably Christos's wife. They were asked to take, the long sleeves around. So Gareth continues, this is personal and brutal. This was not for no reason. The poor bastard. I don't know what he did, but he didn't deserve that. And when he's talking about, was there any tension between them, he goes, yeah, we were a bit annoyed with each other. I think part of what Gareth was annoyed with might have been, a part of what has allowed or made it possible for Jordon to be murdered in the way that he was, right? Because Gareth was at Jordon, he says, all the time you've got to take more pains with security. You need to look up. You need to be careful. And, and Jordon's always, no, mate, I'm because Jordon knew how loved he was, right? But so he just thought that he was going to be okay and no one would do anything to him. In fact, they're robbing from you. If someone's robbing from you, they can harm you. And he just calls the townsfolk that have been gossiping this whole time, saying that there was incredible tension, that they hated each other, that Gareth was dangerous, that Jordon had maybe tried to, had maybe brought this, danger into his own life by bringing Gareth in, by trying to do a good deed for just maybe some stranger that he's taken off the streets, and he's just going, I can't believe this. Gareth can't believe what people are saying. He says they're pricks and wankers, and liars, absolute liars, right? He says, bullshit. He was not fired that night. He said one of them down there knows who did it. The person, making those allegations, one of them was Tatiana. She was interviewed extensively by police, actually, literally, interrogated over and over again. They paid a lot of attention to her. 10 phone calls, 10 phone calls, 3 intense interviews. And this is a little girl that's at the shop. So were they thinking she knew something? Were they thinking she was hiding something? Did they think that she knew something but didn't realize what the information was? They went through all of the accounting with the bookkeeper intensively, so some sort of kind of, forensic audit sort of thing. What's really sad too, oh yeah, and the gossip that these ladies are talking about in Paroa is Gareth had a visit, that apparently Gareth was expecting people that day or at that time that you wouldn't want to meet them, get out of here. The people that are coming to see Gareth are so nasty, you do not want to be in any vicinity. And he's like, that is another new one. That is just, he goes, Paeroa, yeah, what a piece of Paeroa. He's really shocked. He's disgusted at the gossip. He can't believe that this is the gossip. And people that were, if this were Delphi, as I said, if they were investigating this, if they found where this is written and reported, if they spoke to these women and just left it at that, if they couldn't find Gareth, and it took a lot, I think, for Ryan to find Gareth, and but Gareth, Ryan was very intrepid, and he went alone to people's homes. He took someone. He was so frightened by this gossip. He got a friend to come with him and sit in the car to go and meet Gareth at his Auckland home. It was a nice home on the North Shore in a beautiful suburb overlooking the beach. The home that Gareth shared with his partner. His partner gave him short shrift when he turns up. He says, hello, quite friendly, and this is him. And then he realizes, oh yeah, this is serious. And, because she's probably put up with 10 years of his grief and realizing that he's just copping so much bullshit, and yeah, he's just thinking, wow, this is just a shock, right? And he's so upset he has to take a break and have a cigarette and calm down. And then he's talking about, he's clearly frustrated, overwhelmed, and Gareth is really suspicious about what was happening with the freezers. As I said, he was deeply concerned that there wasn't a lock. Now, this is so bizarre. Why wouldn't he have a little flap of metal that comes down that you padlock every night as part of your closing routine? He didn't have a padlock on the gate that's right outside his back door where the freezers were contained in, apparently. And he was very lackadaisical. It's about, these people, I think there's a very specific sort of personality trait, isn't there, where there's kind of this refusal to accept reality in a way because you don't want to live in that world of things being dangerous and that sort of thing, right? Sorry, I'm getting a bit wriggly. I actually get a lot of pain when I'm sitting down for too long. Yeah, so he tells Ryan about the situation with Jordon buying the undersized fish, so probably snapper and the like. Saying that there are some local young guys and that they are shady bastards. Selling him tiny fillets of fish, and he knows how much trouble Jordon would have gotten in. And in the restaurant industry, there are only certain types of operators that are going to wheel and deal in, that type of risk. Generally, they know they really have to be very careful because they've got a lot to lose. Their whole operation, yeah. And, Ryan did mention that Jordon at one point did say, did you take my stuff? Did you steal from the freezers? So, yeah, sure, you're going to think, who, is Gareth telling the truth when he's saying, no, man, I was the one telling him not to buy small fish and I was telling him to lock those freezers? Was he? But Ryan thought he seemed genuinely devastated, and he was really perplexed. Well, not perplexed, but he was quite surprised by how, couldn't believe how clueless Gareth had been about all the gossip that's going on in Paeroa. Well, imagine if this was a case that had taken fire on YouTube. The thing is, it hasn't. Okay, that's why we're examining this in this little bubble. It's a good one to juxtapose because it's one in a bubble, but what would happen? Can you imagine all of these different things, all the different videos that would be being made about it? And can you imagine all the different people that would come under all this rapid fire for all these things that we don't understand? But Jordon accused or asked Gareth, did you do, is this anything to do with you? And that would have been a bone of contention. But I think they probably fought in the way of people that were close like brothers, but there's things that come between them at times, and why would he admit that to Ryan? That's a big admission, considering that we're talking here about Gareth and a possible involvement in Jordon's murder, right? So Gareth does have priors. His family got raided. He said, he was really investigated, but he had handed over his laptop because and his mum, his dad, and his sister got raided just all at once, out of the blue. But then one day they just gave him his laptop back, and that was that. But he says the cops, it was just really like, you see, like this, there's a show here, Underbelly, right? And there was a young cop that was just trying to be who I call the hard Jube. This is Gary Jubelin. He's left the force now. He's kind of disgraced, but he was involved with many cases, became quite a known figurehead sort of thing. Underbelly series was created with him at the core, and now he consults on a lot of cases for TV, etc., like Melissa Caddick's case, right? But the cops went hardcore, and particularly this one guy who was, trying to intimidate him, slamming on the table and saying, just admit it, you did it. And Gareth said he was a dick. The other guy was okay. But, because he had priors, the break and entering priors from when he got put into juvie, he'd been in that correctional detention centre for 3 months. It was hell, and he says, that was bad. Stupid teenage stuff. Not doing that again. And then he's probably sort of somehow, like a lot of young men, actually, I know, hardcore Carl, I wish I could get in touch with him. Same thing happened out of juvie, but into prison. But worked, restaurant trade and everything, just trying to work hard, earn a trade, earn some money. Hopefully, people can get out, go into somewhere where they can get work and build something, maybe have their own restaurant. some of the questions coming up with Ryan are, are the townsfolk turning on Gareth because, well, he was an outsider? Is he just a useful patsy for deflection, right? Because a lot of townsfolk, they've got things to protect, how there's the motive for a crime, and there's a motive for trying to control narratives, or, trying to control information, right? Trying to deflect. And, so Ryan's pondering, are townsfolk turning on G because he's an outsider, or, was there truly a really dark side to Jordon? Because he's still a bit of a mystery man, okay? But the overwhelming consensus about, Rusty was so quick to point that finger, right? But, were her motives because of her situation with Barry and Dick and all of that? Or is it deep and dark? But the overwhelming consensus about Jordon is that, he's a genuine good guy. He's always nice. He fed the children whose parents were pissing it up, So parents would be at the tavern, then they're spending money, not buying groceries. Johnny, I've done that other talk on this case, on Jordon Voudouris' murder, and this one, purposefully to juxtapose it against the Delphi murders. Because, this case hasn't caught fire on YouTube, for example. But, it's an interesting case in terms of, it's a horrific homicide. It was in, a small town. There's a shitload of gossip, misunderstanding, innuendo. There's people that would be, so if you say, okay, let's have a look. What if this were Delphi? What if this took off like Delphi? As I talk it through, you can see, can't you? This is our whole point. You can see, wow, yep, that'd be a series. That'd be an episode. That'd be a 3-hour live every night of the week. Right? All these talking points. But what I'm trying to get at, as I sort of eventually get through it, is that when the truth is actually revealed, and this is real truth, it's revealed that, number one, first-hand sources aren't even correct half the time about themselves, or they're lying, and they've got good reason to, or there's people that are just spiteful or stupid or misguided or mischievous or nasty, hateful. They've got their own motives, and this is, so this case, like probably most cases, they are as vulnerable to this sort of exploitation and bullshit as Delphi is, right? And so I'm trying to say, look at what's happening with Delphi and remember, try and have some distance and some bloody grace about the way you think about it, and just pull it back a little bit with what you believe to be true, even if you think it's from a source or someone directly related to a case. It doesn't have to be true at all. And you're never going to understand someone else's true beliefs, feelings, motives, actions, unless you're that person. So, he was well known for helping out the kids of the town. And, so of course there's a rumor, was he untoward? Remember the rumor that Gareth might have been this young French guy, this blonde guy that, is having an affair with Jordon, right? The townsfolk of Paidor didn't know that Jordon had another wife in between, the partner who had he had children with, and that she was back in Asia. I guess if they learned that, they'd think, there's another Asian connection. But Gareth says no, hell no. Jordon just knew what the town was like, what the kids needed, and the kids knew that they could come to Jordon's Mykonos shop, and they could just hang out there and be safe, you know. Gareth said he's never seen any dark side to Jordon. And remember, he just didn't know him in Paeroa, he knew him from Auckland. And okay, Jordon had been in Paeroa for 7 years, so it means it was 3 years, but that would have been probably quite an intense 3 years that Gareth and Jordon were working together and their families were getting to know each other. They probably spent 40, 80, even 100 hours a week together. That's just how it is in hospitality. And then if they're socializing as well, you know, because they would all end up in one of the person's establishments, you know. And Jordon also went back regularly every week to Auckland. So this relationship continued on, right? And that's just that. You know, the young staff said that too about Jordon. No, nothing untoward. He was nothing but kind, nothing but helpful. He was just trying to help the townsfolk. Gareth thinks that the police gave up way too early, and yeah, maybe they did. Yeah, Gareth also mentioned that, you know, why would I steal this stuff from you, Jordon? I paid for most of it. I bought half of it, etc. You know, he was helping organise things for the store. Regarding the amount of documents filed, one can assume that virtually all rumours that go around already have been investigated by the police. Yeah, I mean, there's 10,000 pages of documents sort of thing. But, you know, we know that in arrest affidavits, we've seen some pretty big arrest affidavits, right? In the Vallow Cox case, and yeah, in so many cases. Gareth had his own theory who did it, yeah, and I mean, he really does think it might be something to do with the shady motherfuckers, as you might say, mind my language, the young shady guys, you know, who were dealing in the small fish. Well, he thought actually, look, it might be the people that were robbing Jordon that were the same that were selling from him, and he thought they might have something to do with it. But he said, look, maybe there was a gambling debt. Maybe he borrowed money from the wrong person. And, you know, with his food cost variance with the restaurant, I mean, he was giving away hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So, yeah. I mean, he was a very generous person all round. I've mentioned before, he would buy things from Trade Me for others. He'd just think of others. He not only bought for himself little things that he liked or for the shop. Yeah, and one of the reasons why Gareth was really distressed, he was so distressed about the damage to Jordon's arms and everything. He said, yeah, because, you know, Jordon, before he'd probably come to Australia, maybe there is compulsory military training, military serving in Greece, like there is in a lot of countries around the world where, you know, you turn 18, you have to do 2 years military service or whatever. So, you know, Jordon, Gareth said Jordon would have, you know, he really would have fought, because he says he's got military training. He might have tried to fight and defend, and Jordon could be hyperactive, focused, fiery. He wouldn't back down. He would try his best. And then Ryan, he says to Ryan says, who takes a rifle to rob a pizza store? Well, I mean, look, they were taking it's an armed robbery. They're going to be armed with something. Well, Joman, I think that there would be defensive wounds. maybe, even if it was just to hide the rifle wound on his arm. But of course, all we need to do is ring the pizza shop and talk to Christos or Nico. I've got an auntie who lives in Orewa, and if I really wanted to get involved like that, I'd ask her to go in. She probably does go in. Yeah. So I don't know though. I think it's likely, because remember, there's talk about, someone had seen, there's just a hammer and a knife, and there's all these things that, remember, Jordon was so lax. Someone didn't need to even take a tool there, a weapon or anything. They knew they didn't have to break into the pizza shop's freezers with a mallet or anything, or shoot a lock open, because they knew it was unlocked. But if there's all these things lying around, remember, Jordon liked to do woodworking. There would have been chisels. This is why I'm frightened. If I would never actually confront someone with a knife, like I'm meaning me holding a knife, because I don't want them to get that knife and turn it on me, right? I mean, that is just a horror to me. But maybe Jordon has picked up something, a woodworking tool, a hammer, a mallet, a knife that he prepared food with, anything, right? And there's, in that situation, you're then in the, sorry, I've been talking so loud. I always get on here and I don't talk in just a regular voice, sorry, because I don't know. So he could have picked something up to defend himself. He could have gone out there, surprised someone, or been confronted and picked up something, and that's been turned on him. And then he's got defensive wounds as he's trying to fight someone off, and then another person or that person's brought out a gun. And, so I think he could have defensive wounds. He could have, I've got some coffee here. I know that's not the best thing, is it? Yeah. But, Christos and Heather, the funeral director, who, not the one that prepared Gareth's body, but the one that was legally charged with collection and storage of his body, he's the one that says that Christos and Heather were asked to bring, make sure he was in long sleeves. I mean, this is what's weird to me about that isn't it a given that someone would be dressed in something quite formal? What were they going to put him in? Like a t-shirt and stubbies? Remember Lee's stubbies, those shorts, walk shorts? He's my man and he's one of those guys in those stubbies. That was a big ad in New Zealand anyway, sorry, I'm digressing. So, yeah, I think it could be either. It could have been to cover up how the gunshot has come up. He could have put his arm up against the barrel of the gun. And, yeah, so it could be to cover that. It could be to cover defensive wounds. We don't know. But, of course, if this were Delphi, we know that this would be something that would be talked about. Gareth didn't think that Jordon had a dark side in terms of holding grudges, but he said with that town, who knows? I think he's really realizing with Ryan's visit, memories that he had, his experience there, it's not what he thought. He's realizing now that he is thought of as some black cloud, a scapegoat, etc. He thought all the girls there were a little lippy, but really amazing, because these are young girls who are working really hard regularly, probably whack hours, going to school and going into the shop, and then coming on the weekends, going to the shop. I mean, here we have a 16-and-a-half-year-old turning up to work at 7:30. She's clearly, or 7 in the morning, she's clearly left school, right? But, they've got work ethics, and they, as you do when you're 16 years old, and especially in that environment, you probably are given quite a bit of so he was really hurt. He was genuinely hurt, I think, by all the things that they were saying, to learn that they didn't support him, But, maybe, because Jordon, he probably thought maybe it's none of their business, but maybe they didn't listen, or maybe they just in the way that kids do, they're so self-centered, they didn't care to learn about the relationship. Maybe they didn't notice the real relationship. Maybe, I don't know. That they didn't support him. He says this really brilliant thing. I really liked it. So, he had to change his mind on these. He was let down. He says, assumption, mankind's biggest fuck up. And doesn't that just sum up Delphi, do you think, guys? Assumption, mankind's biggest fuck up. It really is. There was that, silly skit that Benny Hill used to do. He'd write, assume. Don't assume, you make an ass out of you and me. And Gareth is, he told Ryan that he'd said flat out to the cops, you've got to be looking at the people in that town, in Paeroa or in the surrounds. He was even tempted to complain, make an official complaint against the cop that interrogated him, the one that was, just admit it, you did this. Gareth was shit scared that he was just getting, set up for it, or that he was just going to be the fall guy and the patsy and, give this young cop this solve. And that's a reasonable fear because he's had negative experiences with police in the past. But, of course, the police only want to take cases to court. You've got to assume that they think they can win, right? So, cops rely on confession. In the bad old days, they would plant evidence, anything goes. They were so shady. And, there's an era. There's a, cop of a certain era. That's how they operate. But now they really rely on confessions, and they'll really push for it. And he wanted to make a complaint because he thought he was going to be put to prison. He wants the town. He said to Ryan, he just wants that town to burn now. But no one wants it to be the town. It's just like no one wants it to be Delphi. They don't want it to destroy the town. That poor us, he says, poor us. Look at what's happened. And, so as I said in our first talk that we had, the other episode, these little towns, they are trying to create they're trying to cement something, a foundation to take them into the future, to be known for. So with Paeroa, it's, not only, they tried the street race thing in the 90s with the motorcycles, and that was adrenaline and fun, right? But they're trying to have a reason for people to go places. You go to some towns because the arts and crafts or the great food. You can drive 100 miles to go out to the middle of nowhere for a beautiful restaurant, a little cottage somewhere, and that's what Paeroa was trying to do with being the antiques town. And as I said, they'd already won some sort of award, for being the greatest little town. They have a lot to lose. There's people that have invested so much, and imagine the murderer is one of them, right? It's exactly the same in Delphi. So is this why sources are wrong, or are they just mistaken? We talked about a mistaken one, someone that completely believed that he was actually at the funeral directors across the road on Hall Street when it happened, and he's got this memory of waking up and going out in the morning, and then he has to ask his wife in the background, did we hear the gunshot, dear? Oh, no, I don't think so, dear. I mean, this 2 a.m. gunshot. And then it's like, dawns on him later when, Glenn, the owner of this funeral director shop, insists, no, it was Stephen Roberts was there at the time, living there. And then this old guy's like, oh, yeah, that's right. I'd already left by that time. So, but this is someone who for years had been presenting himself as the person that lived at the funeral directors at the time, who heard a gunshot. People thought this guy heard a gunshot, and it's completely mistaken identity, even by that person. He was running another business streets away. He probably remembers hearing about what happened to Jordon and going out that morning and going out to Hall Street, Belmont Street, seeing everything happen. He's completely mistaken, right? And it's just that's, it's crazy. Gareth, he just couldn't believe it. He thought everyone was great. And he said that Ryan, in 10 years, so imagine all the gossip. Imagine if this were Delphi, if this were a village of the damned, making videos about this case. Ryan was, hello, medicine man. Ryan was the first person that had actually bothered to go and meet with him, to find him, call him up, meet with him. And Gareth, he wanted to talk it through. He wants to find what happened to Jordon. And yet, what does he find out? This whole bitching town, right? And trust me, there are these bitches in Delphi, the JMs of the world, right? Just to name one. It's just like, do you remember Steffa showed it on her channel, but it wasn't her. I thought Miss Fucking Wonderful Katie was one of the persons that went there, but maybe she just played it on her channel as well. Remember an interview with Ron Logan, and it's after everything, and he's out of jail. So this is, he was in jail for a year and he was on house arrest for a year. So it was at least 2 years after Delphi. Maybe it was even after the 2019 presser in April. 2 women go there and they actually go up and they introduce themselves to Ron and they talk to him and they have this amazing interview with him. It's really interesting. And of course people, they use that in a million different ways as well, don't they? But Ron says something very interesting. One of the ladies says, do people come by and, I guess it's, a constant stream of curious and bystanders. And he's like, oh yeah, people come by, they go by, they're gawping all the time, but no one bothers to stop. And it sounded so pitiful. And just, here's a man, he's been put in prison, whatever you think of him. I'm not saying I think one way or t'other, but, he's this devastated old old man. Yeah, there's allegations that he wasn't so nice to some of his girlfriends. And he was a drunk. He got put in prison, in truth, because he's a danger to society. Maybe it was for some other reason, protection, to get something out of him about Delphi murders. I don't know, but he genuinely broke the law in such a way that he was a danger to the community because he was drink driving and doing it whilst he was on probation and not supposed to be driving. So he had repeat offences like this, and so he got slapped a big one and he was thrown in the slammer and he wasn't treated so nice. Treated very nicely. Sorry, I start talking all strangely and slangy, don't I? So how sad. No one's actually, what? Are they just freaks? Weak? Impolite? Cowards? That if you ask someone directly, then you don't have free rein to say what you want. You can speculate even more. So no one has gone to Ron except these women. And he's dead now. No one else is going to interview him. But they'll still talk smack about him, right? And, it sounded really sad. It sounded lonely. While he was in prison, people just went and stole stuff out of his barns. Yeah. And, of course, there's the usual village of the damned at the moment talking about him. They like to talk that they were looking for devices. Of course they're looking for devices. Devices, that's part of this. And whatever anyone like Ron Logan has to do with it, they're looking for devices because they knew about Anthony's shots. So they're obligated to thoroughly vet every search warrant to person in place, looking for any means of recording, storing, sharing, viewing, right? Because they raided the Klein house earlier in February, and then they went to Ron's in March. Yeah, so Gareth felt targeted, and he said that the townsfolk can rot in hell. He's one to bottle up his feelings, but he has really good fond memories, and he just thinks whatever Jordon did, something happened more than a robbery. And the thing about Jordon, he was quite mysterious. He did have very close ties to certain people, right? So he was, very generous with the young people that would come to the shop. He was a good neighbor. He helped Gareth. He had his brothers in the country whom he went to see. He had managed to have partners, get married, have children. But he was still a mysterious individual in Paroa. He didn't socialize there. He didn't have friends there. So they didn't really know a lot about him. And so there can be a lot of speculation, right? Some of the time he was living right above the shop there. And Gareth lived for a time at that shop as well until he found the flat, or this little cottage to go and live in with this other guy, Paul, who says that he spent most of the night drinking with Gareth and watching movies, but if he passed out blind drunk, he wouldn't have heard anything if Gareth came or left. But he testified that the police at that cottage, they did check maybe Gareth snuck out the window so that he wouldn't go past Paul, the flatmate. He said they were quite thorough in the way that they went through that home. Paul just said, yep, you go for it, left them to it to inspect the property, vehicles, the house, okay? Gareth was thoroughly investigated, and yeah, sure, maybe because he was close to Jordon, he worked there, he's male, he's of a certain, ilk with his history. But Jordon wasn't there, right, to testify. Hold on a minute. Gareth is probably Jordon's closest friend other than us brothers. And, and other than Jordon's ex-wife. So Gareth had seen Jordon's lifestyle while he was there, because he was seeing the hours that Jordon worked. He was seeing his routine. He saw that Jordon actually didn't have a lot of time to himself. And then he says something really interesting. And again, this would be fodder for Delphi-ites. I don't know what it means either. It's really interesting. It's really interesting when you crunch data. One thing that police can do in Australasia, maybe, in New Zealand and in Australia, we saw a really good example of this play out and then have a positive outcome, is that police have different availabilities to data from telecommunications than they do in the States. So for people familiar with the way things operate in the States, they have to get warrants for everything, to these telecommunications providers and everything, right? It's a slower process and everything. But in Australia, for the Cleo Smith disappearance, right? The little girl who was taken from a tent in Western Australia and recovered 18 days later in her hometown. They just crunched the numbers of every single phone that had been, in the area pinging off the towers, right? Now, it's not saying that they get access to the actual texts, the phone calls, etc., that those phones made, but they get the number and they get the owner. And that's what the police did when investigating Jordon Voudouris' murder. They got all that phone data from all of the Hauraki planes from, I think, 12 o'clock to 6 a.m. I don't see how leads cannot have come out of that, Well, maybe with Tatiana, Joman, what do you reckon? Maybe with Tatiana, did they think that maybe she knows some of those young scumbags that were dealing snapper, They went hard on her, right? But, hey, there you go again, right? Would Tatiana be the Kelsey German of Pairoa? Kelsey German was interrogated. She was interviewed over and over and over and over again. And the thing with her, though, is that she doesn't communicate as clearly as Tatiana. Were you impressed? I mean, I know Tatiana is 27 now, but you can tell that there's a different mind there, right? Did you find that, Joman, listening to Tatiana's episode? Whereas Kelsey, I mean, she's all over the fucking shop. And okay, sure, something totally crazy and horrendous has happened, and there was a lot going on, right? But, yeah, she's at the least, she's her own worst enemy, right? And because this is just who she is and how she is, and it's the person she is, and well, they want to see if there's a pattern there. They want to get those phones, and then, okay, who was around when Jordon was murdered? Where did they go? And then they have to subpoena to go further. So I was just at the part where I just wanted to say about Gareth and some interesting information that he told about Jordon. Because he'd said that Jordon didn't have very much spare time, and really probably the only time that Jordon would have spare is probably before he opens up his shop, Mykonos, to get ready for lunch service. And then, he's working right through until close, and he would stay open as long as. So, he would be working 12, 14, 16-hour days. Maybe even sometimes longer, I don't know. Gareth said he would sometimes go for drives before opening, right? Just go off on drives on his own. Now, this would be just something nice to do. I love to do this. I wish I don't have a vehicle at the moment. This is the biggest, this is such a barrier in life, the way that I like to live, to go off hiking, to just go out in nature, get to the ocean, to go surfing, so I can't do these things. To take little carnivore dog somewhere. When you can't it's very frustrating. It's very limiting. And I can imagine being in Pairo, just heading, it's one of the most beautiful parts of the world. That's the truth. And it's near a place like Hamilton. Hamilton is it's a river city. It's got the Waikato River that goes out from Port Raglan and through. And, Jordon, apart from the trips that he would take to go to places to buy food and supply other supplies for the restaurant, because he used to do that. There's some places, if you're in a city here like Brisbane, Sydney, wherever, right? You are using Bidfest or whomever. You place orders, you have your bakery delivery, you have this and that and the other, and it's all delivered and it's on a schedule. And I've done that ordering and things, right? And it's the same with any hospitality, so a bar, restaurant, anything. And you have your suppliers, meat, fish, etc. Jordon made the bakery items himself, and he had to get raw materials to do make pizza dough and things like that, and he just preferred to buy it himself. And this is Pairo. It was probably quite awkward and expensive to get deliveries there. I don't know. Maybe most people running hospitality services there do the shopping themselves. I don't know. So apart from those trips, and sometimes Gareth would go with him on those, Gareth is saying that Jordon would go mysteriously for these drives, which might seem, okay, well, is he just going out to other places? Is he sometimes going to the beach? Does he have a friend he goes to? Does he just like to go down to the gorge and listen to the river? Does he go north to Auckland? Sometimes. He's saying, no, it wasn't the Auckland trips. It was these little drives before work. Well, police records are that Jordon's GPS showed that he was going to these specific places in a port city, known for gang areas, you could say, drug areas. And so south of Pairo there, within easy reach for a morning's drive, you've got Mount Maunganui and the ports there. You come over this causeway bridge, the port's down there where there's all the usual suspects are of the people that store all the feeds and the salts and the sand and the whatever else, right? And Tauranga and the ports of Tauranga and these places in Mount Maunganui. He's going to the same spots over and over again, right? Now maybe he's going somewhere because they're running gambling in a warehouse. Maybe he's going there because it's just the type of thing that he's buying off Trade Me. He's going to these same places. But, it was something that was regular enough. It was a pattern. It was enough of a pattern. So how can this, you think, surely how can this be a cold case if there's this aspect to it, right? Do the cops truly know everything about those trips? Wouldn't it just be so good to know? But of course, this is another thing that we have to remain curious about, because we just don't know. We've got no way of knowing. But now, of course, someone, the village of the damned for Pairo, would be making up, there'll be, you can imagine the fodder of this, right? Yeah. Rather than saying, this is interesting. Now, you can try and find out, but how are you going to present that material? You need to be very thoughtful about that. If you're going to speculate on what he was actually doing, because you are dissing a dead person for one thing, casting aspersions on other people, etc., and maybe misdirecting an entire case. Gareth is saying, look, he can't believe that he would be going to these places for drugs because, Jordon was, didn't do the drugs. I mean, but hey, who knows, Who knows? Did he feel like he had to supplement something, keeping his ship of Mykonos alive? Because Jordon strikes me, it'd be so important for him to be successful, not for himself, but because he's, supporting his children. He's supporting his workers. He doesn't want to go out of business. He knows, people are relying on him, his staff, the town, the truckies, he's got a good thing going. He's feeling so confident that he's a part of everything, that no one would harm him, that he is taking some really bizarre risks with his security. It's so weird. And it's this type of avoidance. It's nearly as if, because he was so locked in as a child and his orphanage, maybe he doesn't ever want to feel locked in again. He didn't want to feel like he ever was putting up these barriers. I don't know. But there's some psychology there, right, that, would be good to understand. But we're not going to get to understand this about Jordon. Maybe the only people that can cast light on this is maybe his brothers, Christos, Nico. I don't know. I had wondered, was he communicating through Trade Me with his killer? I don't know why I've written it down, but I've said, were there secret messages and ads? I don't know. Yeah. He closes down the computer. I mean, had he made an arrangement to meet someone? Did he think he was going to go and... But see, he had the keys, right? And the gate hadn't been locked, and he had the keys. He was going down to lock the gate, surely. What was it in him that made him not... Hang 10, guys. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I find the timing of the van shutting down the computer interesting. But, you've got to think, well, surely police had access to everything that was being said online. Everything's okay. I just went and put a treat in our dog's mouth so that he can't bark at couriers and chew at the same time. So yeah, I don't know, it's just super weird. It's a common as all heck vehicle that was seen on the CCTV camera at 1:09 and 1:21 a.m. that morning of the 18th, a silver Prado or something like that, right? They're very common, just family-sized four-wheel drives in New Zealand and Australia. And you have to assume, again, that police have forensically gone through. So there's that missing link. The missing link is the alibi of someone, you know. Jordon might have gone to open the gate because he'd locked it earlier. Well, he wouldn't have been unlocking it for Barry or anything. I mean, that's up to Rusty. She had her own key. And, yeah, it's a weird one, that one. I personally feel that, yeah, he's lackadaisical. And exactly, that's what I'm always saying, right? But we do not know. We don't know. Okay? So it just has to kind of torment us a little bit, right? We do not know. It's just something that we've just got to keep as knowledge, and remember it when maybe other things come to light. But yeah, we do not know. Yeah, we can make up infinite theories, but you know, we've got to try and base it on things somewhere. This is the problem. This is why it might be hard to solve Delphi. Okay, not because the town doesn't want it to be someone from the town, because you know that's going to ruin the town, which could be happening in Pyro as well. You know, this is, you know, I'm sure it happens, right? 100%. But that might be the case. But another reason why crimes aren't solved, or they can take so long, or it might be a deathbed confession, or eventually, you know, someone's familial DNA through, you know, genealogy, you know, someone is found that way. It's because, you know, because of the randomness, and sadly, yeah, you know, we don't know. Okay, so we know that there was a lot of blood at the scene. We know he's dropped his keys. We know that there was there's my 15% battery again. We know that there was the 22 shell on the ground as well. We know he was caught up in the gate, you know, his hand, but the keys are on the ground. But was he trying to, I don't know, and the blood trail going from more around the back of the shop, okay? That's where the confrontation has happened, you know, not just out near Hall Street, but actually right around the back. And it appears to have happened, you know, very soon after he's closed his computer off at 1:30. But there was all the, you know, back and forth about, was there a gunshot at 2 a.m., right? And I still think we kind of don't know this, but I think it was told that Stephen, who was actually at the funeral director's, probably heard it. He was younger. He was up. He had friends there. They were partying. Why would you not do something about a gunshot though, right? At 2 a.m. Call the fucking police. Do something. Or you're a funeral director. Call the security service that does the rounds, who the trans woman called Sierra, for the sake of the podcast, cast aspersions over, right? What did he fucking do about it? Nothing. So I don't even know if 2 o'clock is correct on the timeline. I don't know if I can really believe that. Funnily enough, I'm more inclined to think that there was arguing, and that Sierra got the time wrong of 1:15, and that it might have been sometime just after 1:30. And yeah, because with this, what sort of confrontation or meeting is this that would go on for half an hour at the back of the shop in the middle of the night? So who would that be? Who could that be? Well, I mean, did Gareth go back to the shop and have a talk with Jordon? Why would he go back? He'd been up drinking with Paul. He'd maybe had a beer or two with Jordon before going to his house streets away. He's continued to drink with Paul. Paul's gotten so drunk, he's passed out. He's assumed Gareth's gone to bed. He wouldn't wake up. Gareth could walk out his front door. But, the police would have scoured that home for a trace of blood, for one drop of blood. But, I guess if it was a longer confrontation, and if there was, Jordon downstairs at 1:30 and out, finding someone, negotiation, confrontation, situation, it's more likely to be someone like a Gareth to have this half-hour conversation before it ends up in a gunfight. But, trying to think what was said about the guns, because Paul's gun cabinet was checked. Paul had a license for guns, but he didn't have any license at the time. So there was, the concern about, okay, well, if it was Gareth, where did he just get a gun to take around to Jordon's? So the time frame's really strange, because half an hour from turning off his computer to then a gunshot and then trying to make it to the gate and collapsing there. Did he go downstairs? Because the lights were still on. We've got Rusty, who has given testimony that the lights, everything was open at the back. The lights were on. So we know Jordon was doing, he had the tools there and everything. Did he go down to do some woodworking? Was he, unable to sleep? Even though he must be exhausted. He's had a long day. But could he not sleep? Did he want to go down and work on a project? We don't know. That he's quite mysterious. Something really sad about Gareth, and it's really sad because there was something being held up in front of the faces of, these people of Paeroa about Gareth the entire time. And this is really sad. Gareth had learned some skills, with woodworking. And Jordon enjoyed woodworking and making things as well. And the shop became a kind of memorial. And, because he might have he made himself a pizza. Did someone come in and say, hey, I want to get a pizza, can you make me one? Because he's the type that might turn the pizza oven on. But they apparently the staff made themselves pizzas before they left. But would Jordon want to go down and have another pizza at 1:30? Hear some, and then hear something nearer 2 o'clock? Possibly, but Mykonos, it became, this memorial to Jordon, and people, they took flowers and all sorts of things and cards and letters and that sort of thing, right? So all out on the main street in front of the shop. And there's a photo that shows a wooden sculpture, and this wooden sculpture was something that Gareth said he had made as a gift for Jordon, and it was apparently something quite beautiful, a work of art. And he had asked Jordon just prior, sometime in the days maybe prior, could I take this home with me? I just want to photograph it and show some details of it to people that are interested in the work that I do. So he wanted to photograph it. He wanted to maybe he's making a portfolio, something like that. I'd love to see. I wish Ryan had asked him for photos of it when he was interviewing Gareth at his home in Auckland. And he then, after Jordon's death, went and gave it, he put it back, gave it back to Jordon, I guess, in a way, put it at the memorial. And no one has bothered to find out who made it, what it was, that it was Gareth. Imagine how different things would be if the town had spent the time talking about Jordon. Didn't have many friends, but he did have his friend from Auckland that came to work with him for a while, who made this beautiful sculpture and who left it at the memorial. So Gareth now isn't even sure if that ended up with, maybe Jordon's daughters and, children or ex-partner or brothers. But that would be a wonderful item. But it, probably got nicked, right? By maybe someone coming through town who didn't have any sort of affinity with Jordon. But, it'd be nice to think that is somewhere. I really wish that this season of Guilt by Ryan Wolf, I really wish he could have continued on and gone to talk with Christos and Nico and asked about the sculpture and Jordon's injuries and Jordon's friendships and, what he might have been doing down in the port town south of Pairua on those mornings he'd take those, lonely drives. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess we can leave it there. I'm not sure if I want to... I think I talked enough about Sierra last time because, I wanted to sort of say, okay, well, thinking about timelines, right? Because that's something big in Delphi. And Sierra was so much part of the timeline because, she lived in a place behind the shops on the other side of the alley. Her bedroom was very close to where Jordon spent his last breath. And, yeah, she could have heard those voices. Surely she exaggerates. Remember, Joman, she said, so I heard 36 shots out of 42. Someone else gave testimony. Yeah, I think they did. I think, was it Tatiana, the young woman who worked at the shop? She said, yeah, I think they did do some sound tests. They fired off a bullet. Maybe they were making one house in between. I'm not saying house numbers. I'm saying that she heard 36 of, she made up these figures of, they fired off. They stood there firing off and making noises, 46 different noises, gunshots and all of this. And she says she heard 36 of them. This woman, Sierra's nuts in my opinion. But, and she's the one that brought up it was a Polynesian woman's voice. I know who the voice is. She spray painted on her house that the cops knew but didn't want to do anything about it, etc., right? Yeah. But, I hope people go and look up this podcast and do other research into the murder of Jordon Voudouris, or Voudouris. I'm not sure if the S is silent. There was someone a little bit closer, and that's actually Vicky, who's on the other side of Rusty. And it was, yeah, actually it might have been Vicky who Linda told she saw some legs. I'm not sure, Vicky or Vivian. But you've got to think, okay, well, what credibility does Sierra have as this, key witness, right? Because, yeah. But, yeah, do you think, I think the strangest thing about it is, if there was a gunshot, if it was 2 a.m., this what happened between 1:30 and 2 a.m. And if, Sierra heard arguing, What time was it? Who with? The lights were all on, you know, but was he closing up? Was he still up and about? Was he expecting someone? Did he have the oven on because he was expecting someone and he was going to offer them a pizza because that's just what Jordon did, you know? Probably easier to heat up the pita. I mean, that's a lot of energy though, right? It's a long time to heat that up. Maybe he'd left it on, but it's not an easy thing, right? You have to, it's like coffee machines. You've got to get that coffee machine switched on well before opening, or you're just not going to be able to make coffee when you open. And the same with pizza ovens and things. But yeah, you know, it would be natural for him to offer that sort of hospitality if he was expecting someone. Yeah. Yeah, the vehicle, yeah, Nissan Terrano or maybe a Toyota Prada. Yeah, there's lots and lots of characters. There's a lot to look into. I haven't talked about Dick, Richard Bennett. And so maybe, you know, maybe we will have another episode of this. Probably not tomorrow, and probably not Saturday, but maybe Sunday. Yeah, just to talk about Rusty's ex-husband a little bit. I don't know though. I just feel like, look, you know, if anyone's interested, look up the podcast Guilt Season 1 by Ryan Wolf and watch the episodes. See how, you know, it just hasn't been, you know, polluted through YouTube, but, you know, all the elements are there for it to be another Delphi. And so, I don't know, I just hope people get some perspective or, you know, juxtapose certain things against Delphi and realize, okay, well, in Pairua, you could talk like this, and this about these things, but actually look what the truth is. Look at all the, you know, all the misunderstandings people have been, you know, stumbling along, carrying and spreading. And you can apply it perfectly to Delphi. I mean, you know, there's the armed robberies to talk about, I guess. And again, I still think, yeah, that's interesting in terms of Rusty. There's Richard to talk about. Yeah, and Tatiana's testimony, I guess, and yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've covered enough just to give you the idea of what I wanted to talk about and why. You know, it's just these thought exercises that I, you know, I mean, it's a shame that we can't just exercise this type of consideration and thought and pondering before, you know, and I don't want to be a hypocrite here because, you know, I do my fair share of speculating and I get really interested in certain things and I'm human and I believe certain things or I take things on board too quickly when I shouldn't, and then I realize later, oh, you know, hold on a minute. Like, for example, you know, because Anthony Greeno can be really convincing in his videos and because he's local and he, you know, it seems like he gets boots on the ground sort of thing. So when he's talking about flora fire and he's saying, you know, look at this, he got there from 9.8 miles and the flora fire station's just here, you know, but what he's, you know, what he hasn't continued with and he hasn't completed the thought, he hasn't said, oh, and no, there are people staffed at that fire station in Flora, a block and a half away from the home that burned down, killing these 4 girls. Or, you know, he doesn't say, or, well, actually, it's a volunteer fire station. It's not manned overnight. It wasn't on that night. and all the volunteer fire station firemen persons, they have to get notified when calls come in, and they need to wake up and get into the station and then get the block and a half. So a lot of people are going to say it's by design that there was the delay. And I mean, yeah, when you think about it superficially, it looks like, why was there the delay? Were they just waiting for it to burn a little more? Or you think, look at all these assumptions. Look at these millions or thousands of assumptions that are made about the Flora Fire Department, that, they couldn't get there, the block and a half, before Drew Yoder, the sergeant, got there from nearly 10 mile away. Well, it can put in your head, was this arson by someone who took the risk because they didn't think they would burn. They didn't think they would burn. My phone's on 5%. They didn't think they would burn because they didn't realize that it would take longer than a few minutes. Did someone commit an act of arson and end up committing an act of murder that they didn't intend because they made a stupid assumption? They didn't do their research. The thugs, clearly, or the criminals, and now they're murderers if it's arson, because they thought that, it'll go up, they'll get the call, a fire truck will be there, it'll be put out, so I can achieve my goal, whatever that is, whatever that motive is. People say a lot of things about this, but it will be okay. I'm not going to be a murderer. So, because what a huge risk, right? Or did they not care because, this is a black family in a racist county, so if they go up, they go up. Someone not very bright who wanted to achieve something but didn't realize it would cost lives, maybe, of family members, right? Because look how easy it is to get on board with something being strange about the fire truck not getting there in time from a block and a half away, right? So are we thinking about these things properly? It's like people expect, why didn't they get cadaver dogs and these dogs and that dogs right down to Delphi like that? You think a little town of Delphi, even in the, where are they coming from? In the state of Indiana. You think County Carroll even. You think dogs that take hundreds of thousands of dollars to train and maintain, just hanging around in every dirt road town, every little city like Delphi. And no, these are valuable, rare resources. And it's just this, I don't know what to call it. It's like you put your own glass ceiling on your thinking, right? It's like you're capping your thinking. You just don't keep asking yourself the questions. It's just like you just stop. It's stunted. You're hitting an invisible wall, right? You've got to keep following it through with more. It doesn't mean you're not going to wind right back where you started with something that might be sort of obvious and whatever, but I'm not describing this very well, but I know what I mean. Why didn't they get the dogs? Well, you think they're just waiting? So everything's just waiting there. There's a fire truck with 3 paid staff. I mean, this county can't even pay for its own 911, right? It doesn't even have its own 911 service. It's not even forking out the $50,000 for that. There are 20,000 people in Carroll County. That is their income. That's their county income. It's got to come from, a lot of it would be coming from having packers, active there. Randy Gravett would be able to tell people more about the type of industries that are there. A lot of them have closed down. Furniture. So the deal with furniture, even in a huge country like America, maybe especially, but you know what happened in Australia here, right, is you know, manufacturers from China, from Malaysia, they go to the Milano Fair, and same, not the same. 2 months later, there are copies, and they, you know, and they do this for timber. They do this for all sorts of furniture made out of all sorts of materials, and they make it very cheaply, and they undercut, and people just buy these products. They don't care about provenance or research and development. And you know, people that are making copies aren't putting research and development. They're not inputting. They're not groundbreaking. You know, they're not working on developing materials unless, you know, they're just making up crappy tooling and machinery. And yeah, they work hard. They've got their slave labor and they ship it out. Oh, except not at Chinese New Year. Try explaining to clients that they wait 16 weeks, not 12. But anywho, ruined the industry, and this will be why places like Delphi, even if it's making sort of the craftsmanship type furniture or whatever, these places, small, medium sized, whatever businesses, are all out of business to countries like China. You know, they don't call it the Asian century for nothing, right? And it's, you know, it's how it is. So, you know, think about what income does Delphi have. You know, look at them. They're wanting to raise money. They probably need better streets. They've probably got potholes everywhere. They're trying to raise money for trails. You think, you know, they can't pay to have a 24/7 911 service, right? But they're supposed to have kitted out, uniformed, tooled up, machined up, fire engines ready to go, ambulances ready to go. And this is the same for Paeroa, the ambulance service. It's right across the street, but it took, you know, we'd have to learn. I'm sure somewhere we'd know exactly how many minutes, but you know, someone that was there says it was 5 to 10 minutes, but she's lied about other things. That's the one thing she wouldn't lie about, is how long the ambulance took after they rang, unless she's trying to hide to the lay person looking in from the outside when she actually called. But you know, I think it happened at 6 a.m. that they called. We can probably trust that a little bit. But do you know what I'm saying, right? So, you know, these towns are struggling. They want to survive. Snowbirds come and go. They create wealth for themselves there out of industry and business, and they take it away, right? So you think that after 5 years, when the drop kicks of the county, if there's someone that knows, and they were offered this reward, 18,000, whatever it is, to come forward and to help solve flora fire murders, you think that should be held open indefinitely and not go to the fire department? But the fire department needs it. It needs it to help go and put out other fires, rescue people, buy equipment. They're desperate for it. What are the individual citizens of Carroll County doing to fundraise about that one? And yet everyone around the world apparently can have a say in it and say, that's disgusting. I'm sorry, I have no respect for someone that's sat on any knowledge for 5 months, let alone 5 years, and they think that reward should still be held open just in case someone thinks about coming forward. Fuck no, fuck them, right? So it shouldn't be an open-ended offer from law enforcement authorities to citizens when they know there's a suspicious fire, when there's been accelerants used. 5 days, they should say 5 days, 50 days. In the case of Paeroa, the reward from law enforcement officers for information leading to, solving Jordon's case, 1 year. And you've got people who they don't even live in Indiana. Most of these people are stirring it up. You've got ex-law enforcement officers stirring it up. I don't think that's very good. Excuse me? You don't think it's very good that they take that off the table? Screw you. You've had your chance. You're clearly not a good person. You don't deserve the money. What sort of morals do you have, right? The money is offered as an incentive to someone that might be frightened to come forward but wants to do the right thing. Okay? Or even they could be a piece of shit, but they might know it and they want the money. If it takes 5 years, if you've sat on that for 5 years, what type of scum are you? You are now an accomplice, in my opinion. And same with Delphi. In my opinion, anyone that people say, don't worry, you're not to blame, just come forward, do the right thing, no one's going to blame you. No, fuck, I do. I think, anyone that's waited this long should be charged. Yeah, you're an accomplice. You've had your chance. You've had your opportunity. All you're doing now is allowing a village of the damned still to exist, although we know it's still going to carry on anyway. But you're costing more and more resources, more and more harm. People probably feeling like they have to keep investigating what's going to turn out to be a wild goose chase, obviously, if they're not on the right track. If there's someone sitting on an alibi. I think Delphi and Flora will both come down to alibis, and maybe, and same with Pyro. I think that's pretty obvious. And, sure, there's been other fundraisers for money, right? So, with Delphi and everything, there's a big reward, and it's $325,000, I believe. And this is something separate. This is something, I think people like, people have made some big donations. I don't want to say the wrong. Did Judy run? Maybe donate to Delphi or something. People make big donations and they've fundraised and they've raised for years, and it's a reward. It's separate to, say, the softball field fund, right? And that's fair enough. That's wide open, and that should remain for whenever, or maybe, in 10 years' time, plow it back into the softball field, maybe, for the town, But why should these things be indefinite? These girls lost their lives. 6 girls lost their lives. And if there's some morally decrepit person, okay, maybe they've had 5 years. If they were frightened, they've had 5 years. There's many avenues for them to come forward. So I just say screw them, because they've sat on it. They may as well just not care at all, right? And I don't care if it's complicated. I don't care if it's someone that I love or I'm afraid of or I'm not really sure.